So now that we have our classroom details all set up on Nurture, the next step is to actually create our first assessment on Nurture, and we can get straight away into using the AI to help us create an assessment if we like, or you can create one from scratch. So in this video, I'm going to show you how all of these different settings can work on the Create Assessment page, and how you can create an assessment for the way that you teach, to help in the way that you actually create assessments. So like I said, I'm going to cover how to create all different types of assessments here in this one screen, but I'm also going to show you how you can use AI to help you create an assessment as quick as possible. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to go through how you can quickly create assessments with AI. Okay, or create the basics for an assessment, and I'm also going to show you how to use the curriculum boundary as well, so that your assessments are going to be aligned to the curriculum. So first off, I'm going to click on Generate Assessment, and this is going to open up the Nurture Assistant. So here we need to just give a prompt. So we need to ask it, what do we want this assessment to be about? Because this is for history, and because I'm going to use the curriculum boundary, I'm actually going to pull something in directly from the curriculum just to show you. So I have this curriculum here, and let's say I want an assessment about division and realignment in Europe from 1945 to 92. Okay, so I want the assessment to be about this. Now, you don't have to absolutely copy and paste something directly from the curriculum for this, but you can just type this out. Now, I want this to be for the curriculum boundary to be enabled. So what this is going to do is going to use knowledge from our uploaded curriculum document to create an assessment that will be aligned towards it. Okay. Now, I can turn this off if not. You may notice as well that just bear in mind that when you upload a curriculum document in the classroom settings, it can take up to 30 minutes for Nurture to process that document. So for that initial 30 minutes, or until such time that Nurture can process the document, this might not be enabled for you. Okay. And again, this might not be available for you at the early stage of this year because we are releasing it quite soon. But right, there's a couple of advanced settings I can include here, such as number of learning outcomes and the description length and tone. Now, I'm not going to change these too much, but you can see here you can adjust the number of learning outcomes, you can adjust the length that the description will be. Now, this is in the number of characters, not in words. And obviously you can change the tone, but I'm happy with these settings the way they are. So all I'm going to do is click Generate Assessment, and now in a few seconds, it's going to create a title for the assessment, a description for the assessment, and it's also going to create 3 learning outcomes for me. So you can see here it's giving me a name for the assessment, and you can see it's assessing division and realignment in Europe between these years. It's also going to give you a description on the assessment, on what students are going to be asked to do. And finally, and more crucially, it's going to give us 3 learning outcomes directly taken from that curriculum. Okay, and learning outcomes, specific learning outcomes, are what Nurture is built on, because by giving specific learning outcomes to students, later on when we're giving feedback, we can group students by these learning outcomes, and then you can just give feedback once for that learning outcome to all students, rather than copying and pasting the same feedback over and over to individual students. So let's say if I'm happy to use this suggestion, I click Use this suggestion, but if you're not, you can always click Try Again, and it can give you another, you can try again with the Nurture Assistant. Okay, as well, another useful thing here is you can give us feedback on whether or not this is actually useful. So if you find that this is going to be a useful suggestion, please let us know. Just give us a simple thumbs up or thumbs down. Okay, likewise, if it wasn't a useful suggestion, do let us know. But I'm happy to use this, so I'll click Use Suggestion, and I'll click OK. And this has already filled out the name, description, and the learning outcomes for us. Okay, so another small little update to Nurture this year as well for any of you returning is you can now reorder the learning outcomes. So previously, if you needed to reorder them, you would have had to obviously remove them and re-add them. But now you can simply just drag them up or down, or you can just click these buttons to move them up or down, which is quite useful. Now, we've created these just with the AI so far, but you can always adjust this to how your tone might be, or just add to it as well. So feel free to add to this assessment if you like. You can add to the name, the description, the learning outcomes. All of them are free for you to change and alter at this point. I've just demonstrated here how the AI can create these for me in a few seconds. Okay. Now, that is the basics, or laying the foundations for the assessment. Now, a couple of other things here. You can also add a OneNote document. Let's say if you use quite a lot of your work in OneNote, you can link that in here and students will be able to access it. And the other thing as well is you can also add attachments. So if you want to add any photos here, you just click add attachment, and then let's see, you can just upload them here. So let's say if I want to upload this as an attachment, or this photo, I can do so here. You can also upload videos or audio clips, and you can also, the other thing, if you have like YouTube links, you can paste them into the description, and we're going to embed them into the assessment for that student. Okay, so that is laying the foundations for the assessment. So that is essentially what the content of the assessment is about. Okay, the next step then is the implementation. So how is this assessment going to work? Essentially, how is this going to be graded pretty much, and how are students going to submit their work to you? So there's three grading options here. Well, four technically. The first one being you can just turn off grading. So in some instances you might want to create an assessment that won't be graded at all, and that's totally fine. You can just turn off grading. The next one then will be marks. So if you just select marks, you can give it a maximum number of marks here, and that will be it. If it's a percentage, you can also change this to be whatever percentage you need it to be. Let's say it's 100. And the third option, and this is a new one for Nurture this year, is rubrics. Okay, if I click rubrics, it's going to open up a new panel here for the rubric. Okay, the way that the rubrics work is we take the actual learning outcomes that you've added up here, and those become what the student is graded on. Okay, and you can see here that if I change the order of these learning outcomes, this automatically updates on the rubric itself. Okay, but from the outset we just have three criteria to start with: just fail, pass, and merit, with the default points that are there. You can always add a new column, and you can, let's say, call it a higher merit, for instance, and give it a higher number of points, for instance, and that will add a new column. And from there then you just put in the description of what is a fail, a pass, a merit, or a higher merit for this particular learning outcome. Okay, now you can manually do that if you like, or you can also use the Nurture Assistant here again. So in this instance, I'm going to use the Nurture Assistant again, and you can enable the curriculum boundary for this. So I'm just going to click generate rubrics, and all this is going to do is it is going to create a starting point for the rubric, or even it could create the final rubric that you're happy to use, depending on how happy you are with what the assistant has provided. And as you can see here now, it's given us if I go across, it's given us 5 points. So it's given us a fail, a pass, a merit, higher merit, or a distinction, ranging from 5 points all the way down to 1 point. Okay, and you can see here now, a fail for this one, for instance, means that the student cannot provide a basic description of the emergence of reform movements and the collapse of the Soviet Union. And then on the higher end, a distinction would be provides a comprehensive and nuanced description of the, sorry, I can't read that there, of reform movements and the collapse of the Soviet Union, including multiple perspectives and analysis. Okay, and you can have a look through these if you like, but let's say if you are happy to use those, then you can click use suggestion. One thing I forgot to mention actually earlier on with the curriculum boundary, and this also works on when you're creating the foundations of the assessment. When you use the curriculum boundary, you can see the references for where in the curriculum it has pulled information in. So for this particular rubric, it has pulled in information from page 14, 47. That's it in total. So it's pulled in several different references, one from page 14 and 4 references from page 47. Okay, so if I'm happy to use this suggestion for my rubric, I will click use suggestion, and now you can see that has added a rubric in here. Okay, and now we're ready to use this. Okay, Now, I'm not going to go ahead with using a rubric on this assessment just to show you. I'm just going to go with marks, but I hope this gave you a good understanding on how you can create a rubric for your assessment. Even if you use the AI, you can always tweak this in these boxes here. You cannot change these learning outcomes here. To do that, you will have to do that up here. Okay. Okay, great. So I'm just going to set this back to marks for now. And I'm just going to give it a maximum marks of 20 for now, for instance. The next question is going to ask is, how do you want students to submit their work? Okay, now the default is that they submit online through Nurture. This is ideal for any class group where all the students have devices in their, one-to-one devices in classroom, and they have good technology with them. Okay, or if they all are allowed to use their mobile phones in class to submit work. Maybe I would go with this. But if, for instance, your students don't have one-to-one devices and you prefer students to actually give you a physical copy of their work instead of submitting digitally, you can always allow a paper submission or online through Nurture. Okay, and all this does is students can still submit their work digitally through Nurture if they like, but they don't have to. They can give you their work on paper, and you're still going to be able to deliver feedback to them on Nurture. Okay, and I'm going to touch on this in a later video about providing feedback. But the only difference here is if you force them to submit online, students are going to have to do a couple of things. They're going to have to upload an attachment of their work, and they're also going to have to give you their confidence score. So this is where the student lets you know how confident they were. The student work is obviously going to be available to go back over in Nurture at any time because they've uploaded their work. They have to upload their work. And students have to reflect on their feedback to unlock their grade. Okay, but if you allow paper submissions, the students, they don't have to upload their work. Obviously, they can just give it to you in class. They don't have to give you a confidence score, but they can if they want to go on Nurture, but they don't have to. And obviously the work may not be available in Nurture if they submit a paper copy. But for students to unlock their grade, they still need to go onto the Nurture app and reflect on their feedback. So you're still able to close out the feedback loop, but if you allow paper submissions, you may be losing some data like confidence scores. But I would definitely say if you're a school where students don't have one-to-one devices, I would definitely select this option because it is a much easier barrier to entry for students to upload their work. And even to be honest, it's any teacher that's using Nurture for the first time, I would maybe say go with this just to get students used to Nurture, because it can help that students can just hand up their work and they can close out the feedback loop in Nurture. Then maybe on your second or third assessment, if you have a lot of good technology in the school, then I would maybe say, look, you have to submit online through Nurture. That's just one thing we've spotted. But if you're unsure about this, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to jump on a call just to help you with this if possible. I'm going to allow paper submissions for now just on this one, just because this is the first assessment for now. Finally then, we just need to assign and schedule this to students. So by default, this is going to go to all the 10 students that are in this team, but you can always select this drop down, and let's say if you only want to give this to a specific group of students, you can select them here. But again, I'm happy to just send this to all students in the team. And finally, if I want to schedule this assessment, I can select when I want this to be scheduled for, and then that will go to students at that specific time. Okay. So, but I'm happy for this to go to students now. So that is essentially all the different ways that you can create an assessment. So just to recap, I've gone through how to use the Nurture Assistant to create the basic starting points for an assessment. I've shown you how to add attachments to an assessment as well. And we're hoping as well later on down the line that the Nurture Assistant is going to be able to create those attachments for you. But for now, you're going to have to upload them manually. We've covered the learning outcomes and how you can rearrange them. One thing I probably didn't touch on is the due date. You can always set that here as well. So that was covering the basics of the assessment. The next thing I covered was the implementation, so how an assessment can be graded through either marks, percentage, and how it can be now graded through rubrics, which is a new feature on Nurture. I've covered how you want students to submit their work, and like I say, if it's your first time using Nurture, I would probably say just go with paper submission, just for it's the easiest barrier for entry, and then later on you can maybe use submit online. and finally how you can assign it to students and schedule. But usually if you're just sending this to all 10 students in the team and you're not scheduling here, you don't need to change any of these settings. Okay, now at this point, if I'm happy to send this to students, I'll just click assign. You can now save this as a template for later, so you can actually save all of this, that you can then, let's say you have multiple class groups. Let's say if you have like 2 6-year history classes and you want them both to be using the same assessment, what you can do at this point is you can actually save that as a template, and then you will be able to access that template in another team. Now, I'm not going to show you how to do this right now. I'm going to show you this in a later video. But that can be quite useful if you have multiple class groups for the same subject, let's say. Okay. But you can, or if you just want to save this as a template you're going to use again later, it can be useful later. But I would suggest not saving this as a template until after you've delivered feedback on it, and I'll show you why in a later video. But okay, let's say we're all happy with this to go to students. The last step I'll do is just click assign, and that is going to be it pretty much. This has now been sent to students. Now it is going to say that it's ready for feedback because I selected paper submissions. Because I'm allowing students to submit their work to me on paper, of course Nurture has no way of knowing when a student has handed you up their work, so we have to assume automatically that students are ready for feedback with it. If you had selected they have to submit digitally through Nurture, this is going to say something like pending student submissions, and it's not going to say that you're ready for feedback until a student has actually submitted any piece of work. But that just gives you an idea of what that looks like. So that is how you create an assessment, and this is the assessment page. I'm just going to briefly go over this, and then I'm going to cover everything else in the next video. So this has obviously given us the title, the status of the assessment as a whole, and when it's due. So we can see it's due on September 26th in 7 days. The assessment itself, so this just has this will show up as your teacher name. So obviously this is set up with my first name twice for some reason, but it has the description, the learning outcomes, and any attachments I've added in here. Now if I'd added in a YouTube video as a link, this will embed here. You can always go back and actually edit this as well, so I can go back and change pretty much everything except for, there's a couple of things I think I can change at a later date. I think the grading, I think some of these options, if a student has submitted their work, I think you can change the grading at that point, or you can change certain items. But you should be able to edit most things using that edit button. Whoops, that took me out of the assessment. And then the rest of this assessment page. So then we have the actual student submissions, which are now presented in a table. So this just shows all the individual students. If they've provided their confidence, it's going to appear here once they do. If you've already graded them, their grade is going to appear here. Their status is obviously pending at the moment, and the learning objectives, this will become more clear when I show you how to provide feedback. Finally then is the learning outcomes feedback, and this again I'll cover this in a later video, but this is where you give feedback on your learning outcomes. But yeah, that is how you create your first assessment on Nurture. I know there was a lot covered in this video, but if you have any other questions, please do let me know.